Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. As a presenter, but also as an attendee, I find the best bang for your buck is to experience what you're going to be taking back to your organizations to create transformation. And so the best way to do that is going to be for you to experience the framework that I'll share with you today. And it's intended to fit any organization, small or large. And it's something that you can take back with you personally once you leave this room. So I'd like to start just by talking about some of the most common issues. There are many issues, a plethora of issues when it comes to the root of fear of conflict and rejection. It's the number one reason why organizations aren't able to create sustainable performance. One of the main reasons that many cultures become transactional because many employees can't come to work and be themselves. There's three, I've narrowed it down to three for simplicity for today. The first one being compliance and conformity. So whether you work in a small or a large organization, oftentimes there is a culture. There is a language that has been established. There's behaviors. There are codes of conduct. There's values. And oftentimes they don't match our own personal values. And many times we find ourselves conforming to this company culture that may not be what we truly believe in. So conformity starts to weigh on you every single day working for this company and not feeling like you belong. Plus, you're waking up every morning, you're checking social media, you're reading the news in a newspaper, or you're watching the news, and there's all this weight of all these issues that are going on in the world. And so the media is training you to scan for threats. It's training your brain to constantly think about the negative and issues. And so you're walking around every single day with this weight on you. It creates transactional relationships. It creates an environment where there's fear of interacting with others because of rejection. And so what ends up happening incrementally over time is you lose yourself and you're unable to create deep and meaningful relationships with the people that you're with more than your family. So these are three of many issues. And this is how we'll start to unpack where that fear comes from, starting with our own self-awareness. We'll talk about why we have fear. Fear is a mindset, and there are many different aspects to what leads us to have fear of conflict and rejection. So we'll unpack that together. And then I'll give you a framework for creating a new mindset, unlearning some of those behaviors that have led us to believe these false narratives that we have in our head. And then we'll do a quick values assessment. And all of these tips and this framework, I'll also say, they're quick, they're impactful, they're meant to be meaningful because time is of the essence, and it costs nothing. So oftentimes, fear of rejection and conflict comes from deep personal trauma. And it comes from oftentimes cultural values. So I want you to think about your background and how you grew up. So I want you to think about, just take a moment and think about, go as far back as you can and think about some of these cultural norms, whether it is where you grew up, the people that you were around, gender norms. We also have generational differences, as we've all shared throughout the day today. And it's interesting because we're living in a time where we do have possibly up to 5 generations in any particular workplace. And I don't know about you, but there isn't a framework to understand all of those generational differences. So when you think about it, baby boomers' expectations of career and pay and transparency, communication are different than a millennial or Gen Alpha. There isn't a framework per se to unpack that information just to simply gain an understanding, and a framework that evolves over time as expectations change. So these are all reasons that can create what leads to fear of conflict and rejection. Did everyone think about some of those cultural norms? One of the first steps to unpacking where our fear comes from, and one of the first steps for our employees, is to help each individual do that. And it's essentially getting to know their story. So another aspect to what leads to fear of conflict and rejection is a scarcity mindset. So oftentimes in hospitality, we have a wide range of a diverse work group, essentially many times minorities, and they come from areas where they grew up with very little. And so because they have grown up with very little, they're constantly scanning for threats. They're constantly wanting to stay and keep themselves in a safe environment, which means not speaking up. It's not asking for more. It's the mindset of, I'm just grateful to have a job. Perhaps they had families where they were taught, just be grateful that you have a job. And so this scarcity mindset carries with them through to their organizations. And what ends up happening is they don't share their perspectives. They don't share their opinions, their skill sets. And organizations end up losing out on all of these powerful abilities that are hidden because these employees are scared of losing it all at any moment's time. So it creates an avoidance from trying in many ways. So before I get into this slide, I want you to just think about at work, if you had no fear of failing, think of at least one thing that you would try if you knew it was guaranteed that you would succeed. Just take a moment to think about that. At least one thing that you've always wanted to do, but you just think to yourself, oh, I might fail. I might fail publicly. I might fail in front of others. Raise your hand if there's one thing, at least one thing that you want to do, but your fear. And my point with that is, imagine a world where you're able to overcome those fears every single day, and you have a framework to start to unlearn that fear. And these are 3 really quick ways for yourselves and for others to start to overcome fear. Starting with the CLEAR method, and CLEAR is an acronym. It symbolizes clearing the fear in that moment. It is reactionary. And CLEAR stands for, first step is calm yourself. So however you can do that, however you've learned to do that, however over time you've learned to do that, whether it's pausing and just simply taking a breath before you react to the situation or the person in front of you. And it could be that you step away from the situation, you take a breather. It could be that the person in front of you, you pause and you just stare blankly at them because you're processing. The second step is listening actively. And listening actively to be strategic about the response that you're going to give when you share your opinion. So listening, not just to hear someone, but listening to actively hear the information that they're sharing with you. Why are they sharing this problem with you? Why is it a conflict to them? What is in it for them? What's the benefit for you? The E is for empathize. So once you've listened actively, it's empathizing with that person. Stating facts and feelings. I hear you're frustrated because we didn't meet that deadline. And then pausing to hear them validate if that's correct or not. The A is for assert, so that's when you use all the information that you've actively listened for, you've empathized, and you assert your opinion respectfully, you assert your perspective. And then the last step is to reflect. Reflect and repair as needed. So reflect meaning, what did I learn in that conversation? What could I have done differently? And how did I benefit from what I said or what I didn't say? Micro bravery is strategically setting up those moments for you to practice being brave and overcoming fear. So for example, standing up and doing your first hula dance move. That's one. Singing happy birthday. That's two. So you've all done it and practiced it in a short period of time. And then lastly, staying curious and not combative. Practice when you're in a moment of conflict or rejection, replacing any reaction of statements with curious questions. Whether you need to pause and think about them or have a set of curious questions that apply to every situation. How do you feel about that? Where did that come from? Tell me more. Remember when you were a child and you just simply asked all the curious questions in the world. So you begin to reframe conflict and rejection as curious questions. This next method is something that we talked about earlier today and is something that you would think is so obvious, but it's not something that we often check in with ourselves and assess. So I want you to think about your top 3 values as of today. And these are your non-negotiables. And I'll leave it broad. So whether it's personal values, professional values, whatever helps you to think about what those 3 values are. And I'm purposefully asking you to narrow it down to 3 so that you can examine and really quickly analyze where you're at in life and the top 3 values. What are some of those values? Just shout them out loud. Honesty, integrity, trust, respect, genuineness. How did it feel, I'm curious, to narrow down your values to 3 values in a matter of mere seconds? Incomplete. So still sounds like you're still processing them. So just imagine using this method to check in not only with yourselves, but your employees at work. It's a quick way to understand, for them, understand if their company values at that moment match their own. But it's also a great way for everyone to understand how important values are in the workplace. So once you have your values, similar to earlier, doing an analysis of where did that come from? Where does honesty come from? Where does the meaning behind integrity come from? Was it something that was taught by someone important in my life and my family? Maybe it was a friend. Maybe you're also identifying values that you thought were important to you in the past, but they're not anymore. That's also important to understand. Sometimes there can be guilt behind a value that you no longer honor because it may represent someone or something that you've held on to. And perhaps it's time to unlearn it and make space for newness. So this values method is a way to, at scale, check in with yourself and other people and create a values-based culture. Positive psychology is a key component to reframing fear. And despite what it says, it's not walking around like everything is wonderful and okay and glitters and butterfly and parties and posters and picnics. Positive psychology is much deeper than that. It's whether or not a person's thought process starts with the positives of a situation or negatives. Does the thought process start with, well, what is in my control? How can I react to the situation? There's a lot in your control. Versus, well, that person should have done that, and that person could have changed that, and how dare that person talk to me like that and say those things to me? Reframing fear of conflict and rejection is something within all of our control, and positive psychology is free. And it starts with that self-awareness of understanding our own behaviors, unlearning behaviors, and opening ourselves up to new behaviors. It's starting with what brings you joy. Your first question, what brings you joy? It truly is a lifestyle and a mindset. And speaking from a human resources perspective, and personally, on top of that, working in hospitality, we're constantly serving others. Our first thought is, what does someone else want? What can I do for someone else? What does the customer need? What does the employee need? So it's almost a double whammy when it comes to the opposite of positive psychology. I'm sure you can all relate. So it's practicing, starting with yourself and what brings you joy, which may feel uncomfortable. And that leads to normalizing celebration. So one way that you can start to think about yourself and practice and normalize, starting with what brings me joy. Just imagine if you worked in an environment that was customized and designed around that first question of what brings me joy, and if everyone was able to operate under the same circumstance, everyone would be thriving because they would also be designing their life around and starting with what brings them joy. So normalizing celebration is very simple. It's easier said than done. And it's thinking about all of the things in one day that you did well and writing it down. All of the things that you did well, all of the things that you achieved each day, and writing them down in your phone, typing them in your phone, writing them down on a piece of paper, sharing them with someone. Consider a growth journal. It's speaking to yourself about all of the things that went well versus all of these flooding thoughts and insecurities about what you could have done differently and what didn't go well. And then there's the power of yet. So every single time you think of, oh, I don't know how to draft that presentation, completing the sentence with yet. It's so powerful. It creates a learning mindset, a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And then lastly, and this one we'll all do together, I want you to complete the sentence. I am remarkable because. So take a moment to finish that sentence. Willing to learn new things, yes. So continue to think about those statements. And it's powerful when you write it down, and even more powerful when you say them out loud. Whether it's to yourself, but especially if you say it to someone else. So this is the framework that I've just shared. And once again, it's designed to be fast, efficient, but deep, meaningful, and impactful. And it costs nothing. And it's intended to be a system that continues to evolve with what's going on in the world, but also evolve with humans and create a human-centric environment. How do you feel? Remarkable. Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you for having me and participating.